right. It's 7:01. Let's get started. We have first on our discussion, we have our budget projections. And I'm going to turn the mic over to Director of Finance and HR, Ms. Kara Kramer.
Good afternoon. So everybody should have two things on their seats. One is the PowerPoint, and the second is the capital summary handout that we'll refer to. So we've had lots of discussion about our projection models internally, and something that we did this year is we took the audited numbers from 2019 to 2023 that we just finished June 30th of 2023, and we looked at the average on both revenues and expenditures. And so we used those actuals and took that set and moved it forward, so basically projecting forward for our forecasts. So what we have found from the audited actuals was, excluding ARPA, our revenues increased 4%. And if you include ARPA in that money, or in those revenues, it went up 6%. Our general fund increased between 5 and 6%, and I say between 5 and 6% because literally some years it would be 5.4, 5.6, 5.8, so I'm saying 5 to 6%. Our capital revenues, again, they also increased 4%. And our capital fund expenses, they basically increased based on the anticipated expenditures. So now that I've given you kind of the framework and the model that I put together, we'll go through graphs and kind of talk through that. So on this graph, the dark color, the dark black or gray, whatever it shows up on the screen, that is our revenues, and the lighter color is the expenditures. And again, this is from 2019 to 2023. This does include ARPA. I wanted to show you guys all a comparison of the revenues versus the expenditures. So in 2020, we received CARES money. I think 21, it was also some CARES money. And then 22 and 23 was the ARPA. So I'm using this all as ARPA, even though it was called different things throughout that time period. So you can see on the side, in 19, our revenue was about 16.4, and our expenditures were 15.4. And then in 2023, the final 5 years, our 5 years, it was 21.8 versus our expenditures of 17.9. Now moving forward, again, I have our the full 2019 to what's projected out for 2029. So this graph shows the lighter gray is our revenue, and the black and white hashtag kind of at the top is the ARPA funding. So you can see, and then the line is our expenditures. So you can see that it's been kind of a steady, so from 2023 to 2029, our revenues and our expenditures kind of have a slowly increase, a steady increase, we'll say. In 2029, it kind of, the gap lessens. And again, these are all just projections. These are not gospel. Timing can change a lot of things. And these are just to kind of put this out there and have discussion. So the one thing I do want to point out is I carved out the ARPA funding, which is at the top. But however, it's hard to do that on your expenditures. You can't carve out, because when we had the big year, well, I should say, when we were having different salaries, people leaving, or I'm sorry, not people leaving, but kind of the what cities are struggling with workforce, you can't carve that out on our expenditures. That is already in, whereas the ARPA funding is a direct one line item that I can carve out. Now let's move forward and talk about capital fund on the next slide. So again, these are actuals. Our capital fund is funded through our payroll taxes. 0.5% is put into capital. The other way it's funded is through transfers. So our general fund will transfer money based on our capital anticipated expenditures. So the 2023, the large transfer of $5.9 million was the $3.9 that was already budgeted for capital expenditures, and then we just recently did the amendment for the Public Works facility for an additional $2 million. So that's where we got to that 5.9. Next, I'm going to have you guys take a look at, we're going to go to this next slide, but I also want you to pull out the handout. That's the capital summary. So we met with all department heads to kind of talk about what their anticipated expenditures would be. General government and IT, we don't really foresee too much capital in the next 5 years. There might be something here or there, but as far as general government, there is not really anything anticipated. Police, obviously they need police cars, so we have those in there buffered. Just in case we have accidents, or we took the price and increased it a little. But on the bottom, you can see how many cruisers we plan to purchase. The fire department, they gave their wish list of items, and we included that in there. And then Public Works, we also did the same. We have the $2.5 million of roads that has been ongoing for several years. We have the Public Works facility. We're hoping that we'll get most of it done in 2024, this current fiscal year, and there'll be a little bit carryover in 2025. And then again, there's additional equipment and vehicles that Public Works needs. And we also have the firehouse remodel. These are all placeholder amounts. We don't have any definitive costs. The most definitive costs we have are for police cruisers, and that's just using our current amounts that we have. And then obviously the Stevenson Road that we kind of just talked about the list a couple meetings ago. So now with that, these are all put into our capital projections on this spreadsheet. So again, this gray is the revenue, the black and white is our transfers, and the expenditures is the line. So in 2024, you can see that there is a big peak. Well, that is due to we only have about $400,000 for 2024 budgeted for transfer. We have a healthy fund balance in our capital since we transferred over that 5.9, and that will be my next slide. But I just wanted to show that in 2024, that peak is we don't have to transfer any money based on using our fund balance. Again, in 2025 and 26, we have some pretty substantial amounts baked into our projections based on what the departments need, and that's still, there's a little bit of transfer needed for 25 and 26. However, from 27 on, at this time, there was no transfer needed. So my next slide, and you guys can refer to your PowerPoint if those numbers are kind of small. This shows our fund balance. Again, this is the full picture of actual fund balances versus 2029 fund balance. So we just ended our year 2023 with 15.5 in capital fund balance and 8.3 in, I'm sorry, 15.5 in general and 8.3 in the capital. So I'm projecting in 2029, even with our large amounts that we have and projects that we have, that we will end our general fund at 17.9 and our capital about 3 million. So that's a pretty, it's a healthy fund balance. Again, that is from 24 or 23 to 29. That's an additional 4.7 million in fund balance. And to give you some perspective, from 2008, we ended our fund balance, our general, at 1.9. And at the end of 2018, our fund balance was $14.8 million. So it's like 12.9 that we grew. Now, that was a lot of time and growth here in the city, but that just kind of gives you some perspective. Okay, so now moving on to fund balance. These are with the different classifications. This graph shows the gray area is our total fund balance. So behind the scenes, kind of the background is the total fund balance. The white is the emergency reserves, which is 30% of our expenditures. The resilience fund, which started in 2023, is the black and white, and that is the static $5 million that we have for the resilience fund. And then the blue or the light gray, however that comes out on your guys' sheets, is the unassigned. The small amount at the top, non-spendable, those are prepaids, and that's what's adjusted when I do my accounting for the audit. So then finally, on my next and last slide, this just kind of gives an idea of from 2014 to 2023, and this is all statistical information that's at the end of the audit that I do each year. This just kind of shows the top the top payroll employers in the city. So from 2014, we have 3 businesses that are still on our top 10. Can anybody point those out? Looking here closely. Is anybody awake? So Wild Flavors, Toyota Bashuko, and Erlanger Ellesmere Board of Education are 3 that are still on in 2023 in our top 10. So this kind of just shows that how we have diversified our business portfolio of our employers here in the city. Clawfoot is Signature Hardware, and National Underwriter, I don't believe is no longer here. So with that, that is our budget projection model that I've put together. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and if I don't know the answer, I can be sure to get back to you.
I just have a quick question about this last slide. Kara, which of these employers are no longer in Erlanger? So you said Clawfoot Supply is Signature Hardware. That's still here, obviously. They're just not, they're not in the top 10 anymore. But which of these have actually left the city that were on the 2014?
So Schneider Electric USA, I don't believe is no longer in the city. Obviously, our top number 1, Toyota Motor, that was the big discussions I'm sure the city was having in 2015 when they announced they were leaving. Convergys is no longer here. That building is for sale or has been purchased or still? Okay. Gap is still here. They, I believe, just announced an expansion not too long ago. So obviously Clawfoot, the city of Erlanger was in our top 10 businesses. And then obviously National Underwriter, so.
I think what's interesting is the total percentage. So the top 10 businesses back in 2014 made up 61.98% of our payroll revenue. And now, if you compare that to 2023, it's a more diversified portfolio. Wild Flavors just being at 10%, but nothing over, significantly over 10%. Okay. Yeah, it's still, it's still, total portfolio is now, the top 10 is 49.71%. It's pretty diversified. All right. With that being said, I just want to say thank you to Kara. I think what's really cool about this is we can redo this every year. We made it based on actuals, which I think just completely changed the landscape of how we're going to do this from now on, and really built it into our budgeting. As we're moving right into budget, we're going to be updating the projections, and there's no reason that this can't be a yearly conversation. So, cool.
Yeah, and after each audit, I will make sure that once we get actuals, that we keep comparing and having this as a forefront in a discussion. So this is the part that I really like in accounting, because I get to use my numbers and put this big puzzle together, so.
Thank you, Kara. You put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and I appreciate it. All right, next item on for discussion is the insurance premium taxes. This is mostly just a conversation between you guys, but I did want to just throw out a couple of pieces of data to help facilitate the conversation. So our insurance premium tax, and these are going to be just round numbers. Let's make this relatively easy. It brings in approximately $4.3 million in revenue based on last year's actuals. And our current tax rate is 9.75%. Okay, so what I did, I needed to get to the dollar amount that has the tax rate applied to it. So if we do the 4.3 million divided by 0.095, you're going to get $44,102,564 that has the tax rate applied to it. Okay? Then if we work backwards, you're going to get that each 0.25% that you decrease, it's going to be about $110,000 in revenues. Okay, so 0.25%. So if you go down to 9.5%, it's going to drop to $4,189,743. So $110,000 reduction. Does it make sense? It's rough, but that's pretty much how we calculated it back in 2020 when we took the 0.25%. And it was about $70,000 back then, but now that has increased to $110,000 every 0.25%. Okay? Does anybody want to start? Mr. Hermes?
Well, I mean, I would love to see us continue to try to reduce that tax rate. The 0.25% that we took off there was, how many years ago was that? That was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
It was in 2020.
Okay.
It was 4 years.
I mean, I think while the city could probably easily stomach a 0.5% decrease, I think we should at least consider the 0.25% to show a continued effort to try to decrease that. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, so your suggestion is to bring it to 9.5%, which would reduce the revenues by about 110 grand. Okay. Any other conversation? Ms. Kyle?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Hermes. I think the 0.25% would be doable based on what we just heard. And that, at least give an effort to try to give relief to some of the citizens that have to pay all these taxes on their cars and homes and whatever. So I would go along with that.
Okay. Right, Ms. Reckers?
Yeah, I think a 0.25% is fine. I mean, I'm sure we'll notice it in the budget, but I don't think it'll be like substantive to our operations. I would like to revisit, it doesn't have to be obviously today, discussion around the franchise tax. We talked about it in August, when we talked about the compensating rate at that point, but I'd like to bring this back up to talk about a sunset for that, whether it's over 5 years or 8 years or whatever that looks like. I know other cities have sunset their rates, and we are one of the remaining few that still charge for dispatch. So I don't know when that discussion would need to be had. I feel like at some point you guys were looking into that to see how we would go about reducing it.
I can re-look at that, and I can have ready for our regular meeting. I don't know off the top of my head. I know I looked at it back in August, but I don't recall. I do want to remind everyone, though, if we are going to lower the insurance premium tax, we do have a hard and fast deadline of that we have to get 2 readings in. Ms. Hoffman believes by March 23rd, but we need to confirm that date. But we definitely will need to start that process at our next February meeting.
Okay. For the franchise fee, and I'm trying to remember when we had these discussions last year, it was August-ish. I believe the franchise fee brings in $800,000, so it's a pretty substantial amount to just wipe away at one point. So even just like, I mean, it's just kind of like the insurance premium tax where we'd have to do it in little chunks, I think. Ms. Kyle?
I just have a question for clarification. The franchise check, correct me if I'm wrong, it's on the Duke Energy bill? Is that the one?
It's utilities.
Utilities, okay.
Yeah. Ms. Jasper Lucas?
Do we know for sure that, and I mean, this is just me not paying attention to my utility bills, but if we don't charge the utility, the franchise fee, does it for sure come off of the bill?
I mean, it's
Because the way the insurance,
supposed to, but
well, I know it's supposed to, but the way the insurance premium tax is, it's a tax that the percentage would lower. I don't know what it looks like on the utility bills. I mean, I can pull up my Duke bill while I'm sitting here and see.
I mean, if we reduce it, they have to. I mean, it would be a part of our franchise agreement. So if we drop it to 2.5, at that point, I don't know how they would be able to call it the franchise fee on the bill and still charge 3% if our franchise agreement's been changed away from the 3%. Because it does actually list out franchise fee on the bill. It's not like rolled into state and local taxes or anything like that.
We will confirm that, and I'll have, in my attorney's report in 2 weeks, I know it's not a caucus meeting, but I'll have all that information. I'm going to reach out to both Owen and Duke, our contacts on the franchise. My understanding is there may be another city or two that has done this, and I just want to make sure that that your question is answered, Jennifer, that yes, we would get that money back.
I just pulled up my Duke bill, and it does say at the very bottom of the very last page, billing details, taxes, franchise fee, mine's $5.35. Rate increase for school tax, $5.52. Just so nobody thinks I'm not paying a lot for my Duke, I have Owen Electric. This is just for my gas. So, because it sounds really cheap. But anyway, so yeah, it is separate on the bill.
Yeah.
It doesn't say what the percentage is or what the amount is, but it obviously is calculated on here.
Yeah. Okay. So am I hearing some consensus for the 9.5 for the insurance premium tax and reducing it by 0.25%? Ms. Jasper?
The only other thing I was going to say is I would love to see us try to commit to looking at a 0.25% decrease each year, just to see if that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense every year, but when I I printed out my insurance bills today. Just on mine alone, that's 0.25% is just $3 on my bill. That's my homeowner's insurance. And I feel like I'm probably a pretty average homeowner in Erlanger. But like I've said before, it does impact a lot more people than the property taxes affect. So I just would like to see us look at it on a regular basis and not just every 4 years, reducing it by 0.25, if it makes sense to reduce it. I realize it's a lot of money, but chopping away at it slowly will eventually make a bigger impact on our residents, and that's ultimately who we're trying to save money. The property taxes only directly affect property owners, but the insurance premium taxes affect businesses and every single person who physically lives in Erlanger, which is also all of the renters that are the non, owner occupied. It affects all the renters too. So that's why I want to see us look at it more frequently.
Franchise fee does as well.
Right, yes, I agree. But it's also not as much money.
Okay. I think we have direction. So we'll put the first reading on for the February council meeting, please. Okay. Ms. Reckers has requested that we remove the small business incentive ordinance for tonight. Next item on the agenda is the Board of Adjustments vacant seat. We all received an email from Eric Rolfe, who's interested in the vacancy. I immediately screamed with joy when I read his email, because he's incredible, and we would be blessed to have him on the Board of Adjustments. And I got a lot of letters of support from you guys. So if everybody's cool, we will put on the February meeting for Mr. Eric Rolfe to join our team. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Task forces. So we always kind of talk about this in January. Some of the task forces that are currently out there, any kind of new objective or project that we're trying to tackle. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add or speak about? Ms. Nicely.
I met with Chief Gotzi and discussed possibly revisiting the fire and EMS task force. We agreed that it would be better to put that on hold until they can go back through the new plans and stuff. So it might be at the end of this year, early next year, but they'll keep us updated when they are ready for us to form a task force.
Okay. Okay, so just to revisit our existing, we have the Parks Master Planning Task Force, City Beautification, Small Business Incentive Task Force, the Cherry Hill, I think. Did you pause it, or?
We kind of paused it because there weren't a lot of issues, and there wasn't really, kind of like, it's silly to have a meeting for the sake of meeting.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I really want to cease that either.
Okay.
It's kind of like, we'll meet if we need to meet.
Okay.
But right now, there's not a whole lot to discuss because hopefully there's not going to be any more issues.
Okay. I think that's it. All right. All right. I'm not forgetting any, or am I? No. Okay. All right. The last item on the agenda is the executive session to discuss the future acquisitions or sale of real property. Jack, do you want to handle this one?
We just need a motion. Yeah, so the motion, yeah, go ahead.
Now that she's got her voice, she's ready.
I make a motion to adjourn the regular session and move into executive session according and pursuant to KRS 61810-1B to discuss the future acquisition or sale of real property.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Nicely and Mr. Hermes. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. We will recess into executive session. I need a motion to come out of executive session and go back into regular. Ms. Nicely, Ms. Jasper Lucas, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We're back in normal. Who wants to be done for the night? Motion to adjourn, Reckers? Hermes? Any discussion? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I was trying to get us out of here within an hour. All right, go for it.
Kara sent out the budget timeline today, and I'm a little bit concerned that council's going to be receiving or having the budget presentation a month later than normal, which cuts out a decent amount of time for us to, I mean, I realize that we are given a lot of time, more than other cities.
That's the only thing I would jump in and say is, almost every other city I represent, they do like a first and second reading like in the same week. What is the current schedule? I know we talked about this last month. Is it, what, I saw the email, but I didn't look at the dates.
We are having our budget presentation on May 18th.
So you got 6 weeks, right?
Right, but we also have an ad hoc budget committee that is then scheduled to meet on May 29th, which is not much past the initial presentation, and then the updated executive summary will be sent to council members on May 31st. It's just not a lot of time. I've only ever had a month more than this, so that's what I'm accustomed to, and I'm just concerned that I have seen historically where things, and I'll just bluntly say it because that's how I say things have been presented to us and there's not enough time to make changes. And I won't vote for a budget that I don't agree with. And I don't want something to be shoved down my throat and told that, well, we only have time for this, because I've seen it done before. So that's my concern, is that we're going to have 30 days less. And
Okay. Well, the reason behind it was falling into everybody's spring breaks. So April is spring break and Easter, and we have many different spring breaks throughout the city department heads, and we are trying to make it easier for work-life balance.
I'm not dismissing that at all. However, then that puts us into June, and you have 9 people here that I tried to schedule my vacation literally around being able to vote on this. I'm not saying that our employees need to do that. That's not what I'm insinuating at all. But I am saying it just puts us in a very tight timeline, and if there's no quorum, there can't be a vote. So we're up against challenges with everyone. It's not just department heads, it's not just, council having a quorum, and I'm just speaking from my own experience of being presented things that I have to vote on because there's not time to make a change, or there's not time for me to ask questions, or there's not time to do further research on things. And I don't want us to get in that situation.
Real quick on, so as I went through that budget process, it was my first one. I really wasn't in this role yet, but 2 of the problems that we encountered I wanted to solve. One of them, the spring break thing gave us tremendous problems in-house with staff and trying to get things figured out. And that was one thing I wanted to kind of get away from. So what I wanted to try to create was us doing our due diligence on the front end, giving us a gap for spring break, coming back, reconvening, and then taking this thing home. The other problem that I saw from my standpoint is it lingered so long in the back, and I'm not trying to compress it to cause hardship. I tried to compress it in the end because by the time we went through all that, I was unfamiliar with things I talked about and we had agreed upon or looked at because it had lasted so long. So I wanted to keep it fresh and be more intimate by keeping it smaller, but I see your point of view too, as far as, does it give us enough time to make changes and stuff like that. But just from my standpoint, so you know why I did that, it was because I felt as though, I remember sitting here thinking, I hope they don't ask me that question because I don't remember anything about it because I just became less intimate with it. So I just tried to keep it compressed to help out. Yeah, Rebecca.
And you did respond to my email when I had a similar concern. Just the reality is, if we have the budget boot camp on the 18th, we've got five business days before a 3-day weekend. And then the task force meets on the 29th. So that doesn't give us much time to collect people's opinions, get them back to staff, and have a reasonable, it shortens our time where we would typically give you guys like 72 hours,
That's fine.
And it's just the way it's going to have to be. Apologizing in advance.
No, this is not rigid either, so please don't take it wrong. This was just a concept like, hey, what do you think? So float it out there, and we can change dates and make it different. I have no problem with that. That was just, I had two concerns. That was my way of addressing it, and then, if it creates other problems, that's not what I'm trying to do. So, if we can move it forward or whatever your suggestion might be, I'm totally open.
I'm fine with what you've proposed. I'm just, it gives you guys very little time to respond to our list, which we don't, we obviously haven't, we're months away from this, but I don't even recall how many, we made 20-something questions last year. The year before it was more than that. So just, we can make it work. I just feel it's going to be a crunch for Miss Kramer when we get our coming back onto it, or giving her results, and then a 3-day weekend to respond.
So when we were looking at this, we are up against Mother's Day weekend, and we are trying to keep it a Saturday budget boot camp, because I know in the past, one year we switched it and we did it at a caucus meeting, and then people didn't like that either. So we will email before the boot camp. It will go out. So you guys will have that in your packet.
A long time before that.
Yeah. I think, I want to pull this back up, that Friday, May 3rd, we'll email that out to you.
Is that 15 days ahead of time?
Yeah. A one day, which one are you talking about? For Memorial Day?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
You'll have one day after a 3-day weekend to compile anything. That's just
Yeah.
the way that you've crafted it. I just want to make sure we're in alignment.
Yeah.
We'll work with it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
If I have to be here till 7 o'clock at night to answer questions, it's just the way this kind of worked out this year, and we were trying to take everything from last year. Even when we started doing budget in January, and then by the time we got to budget, the quotes weren't good, stuff had changed, and vendors, so I actually helped condense this. So, sorry, but, okay.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Have a good evening.
Is that the motion to adjourn?